Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Sarman Sarkisian. I'm a medical oncologist and I'm on the board for the Armenian American Medical Society, and I'm the chair of the Membership and Mentorship Committee. And what I take a lot of pride in is our mentorship program. It was a chair position that was started many years ago. We've been providing a lot of services to Armenian students that are aspiring healthcare professionals, whether it's medical school, pharmacy, dental school, various other specialties like speech therapy or psychology. And what's important for us is bringing together a lot of the Armenian youth as well as our large network of Armenian healthcare professionals to try and make sure that there's a strong network in which students have access to people in various fields, and they can get guidance on whether it's research, letters of recommendation, study tips, standardized test strategies. So, a couple of months ago, we decided to launch an interview series with students along their path, whether they're an undergrad, right in the middle of the application cycle, fresh off taking a standardized test like the DAT or the MCAT, and even those in the middle of medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, and some of the recent grads in residency and fellowship. So, today, I'm lucky enough to have one of my former shadows, Hasmik Adityan. Hasmik, very nice to have you on today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start the interview?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sarkisian. My name's Hasmeek, and I just graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's in physiological sciences. I'm currently on the pre-med track and plan on applying to med school in the 2025 cycle. So very excited about that. I'm taking my MCAT in 2 months, so I'm very happy to be here and talk about some tips and provide some insight on the pre-med journey.
Well, you are right in the thick of it. So, I remember when I interviewed you and I looked at your resume, I was really impressed with your GPA. How did you how did you keep the high marks? What are some strategies you had? How was it different from high school, your lower division classes, upper division classes? Share some of those insights.
Yes, I'm happy to. So I just want to say my transition from high school to UCLA was a big one. And I really underestimated the difficulty and rigor of a college education. And I think that led me to struggle in the first 2 years at UCLA because it really is no joke. And what it kind of forced me to do is really see what's not working and figure out how I can change my bad study habits into really good ones. And there are three things I incorporated that I'm very happy to talk about. And when I tell you the drastic change that I saw in my grades, my test scores after incorporating these three, it's drastic. And so one of them was I actually used something called Anki. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's this app that it's a flashcard app, but it has an algorithm. So it kind of shows you cards that of like topics that you don't know. And there's a huge tutorial on it. And I think that app helped me with the classes that require rote memorization. So that's anatomy, physiology, biology. And for the more difficult classes like OChem, chemistry, and biochemistry as well, the second thing that helped me was a study group. I think finding a study group is so helpful because there's a topic that you're struggling with, but person B might be so well in that topic, and you can kind of just exchange information like that. And when you're sitting and studying with a group, there's things that maybe you might have not thought to be important to know, but they realize, oh no, you have to know this. And it kind of helps fill in the gaps here and there. And not to mention, it also helps with motivation. It's really hard to be in these difficult classes alone. And at least having this support system is super important and it will really help you succeed. So if anyone likes to study in groups, I think a study group is a definite game changer. And even talking through the concepts, teaching other people the concepts really helped it stick. And it really helps you acknowledge what you do and don't know. Because you might know this topic, but once you have to get up and teach it to someone, you might realize, oh, wait, I don't know it as well. Or, oh, wait, I think I have it a little mixed up. So the third thing, it's also not cramming. And I was very, very bad at incorporating this skill. I had a bad tendency of underestimating the quarter system and how fast paced it is, and it really is. It's not a joke. And so cramming, it wasn't working for me. And so what I learned is after each lecture that I would attend, I would set aside an hour after the lecture, not long, just an hour. And right after class, I would just review that lecture once again. I think to kind of beat the learning curve, when you learn a lecture the next day, the like kind of the magnitude that you of the material that you forget drastically drops. So kind of getting ahead of that learning curve, and right after your lecture, taking an hour or even 30 minutes just to reread through the lecture notes that you just went over, I think it'll also help stick a lot. So those are some of my three things that after I incorporated into my study habits, I noticed drastic changes. So
Very good. And I really liked your commentary on the study groups and, in particular for students who could benefit from it, but perhaps they're shy or maybe don't want to be put on the spot. I would highly say it's better you expose your weaknesses in front of a small group of people that ultimately don't matter and be really ready for the one person that matters, and that's the professor in the exam. I
yeah.
think it's absolutely beneficial. Flashcards, I'm a huge fan of. I've built a couple of question banks over the years, and in one of them, I have about 7,500 flashcards, and another one, 5,000. I actually have my original flashcards in the garage from my residency and fellowship. And, each one is sort of a box that big. I probably have 8 or 10,000 in each one. But, all that matters is getting that good grade at the end and moving on. Because as we know, grades are the currency with which you can purchase, access to professional school. And not to make it transactional, it's a privilege to be in professional school, and it's even a higher privilege to be able to care for patients. But in order to even get there, you do need to meet the criteria. So, so moving on, I mean, okay, you built these study strategies, it paid off, you did very well. The next pillar was you standardized exams. You decided to wait until you wrapped up your bachelor's degree before you took on the MCAT. I mean, what was sort of your thought process and how did you go about it?
So for me, it was more so, it depends how many gap years you want to take. So originally, I had planned to take only one gap year, and I tried to study for the MCAT last summer. But with the research obligations, I kind of put MCAT on the back burner, which my fault. And I think that's a good thing that everyone here can learn from. I personally believe that the MCAT has to be something that you, if you have the privilege to, of course, dedicate full time or almost full time to MCAT specifically. And I tried to do the whole juggling MCAT with classes or research, and it just didn't work. So I actually had originally signed up to take the MCAT March of my senior year. And so essentially what that meant was studying for the MCAT during my fall quarter of senior year. And for the first 4 weeks, it was working. But eventually, once you start hitting midterms and finals, you drop the ball with the MCAT. And inevitably, I just sat down and said, okay, so this half studying thing isn't going to work for me. So maybe I need to instead slow down, take the extra year, graduate, have nothing on my plate besides the MCAT, and really focus on that over the summer. And I think this is also based on if you're able to juggle multiple things at once. Me personally, I wasn't able to. I really wasn't able to juggle part-time research, part-time MCAT, or part-time school, part-time MCAT. So I realized what's best for me and how I best learn is to really just focus on one thing, and that one thing is really big. I mean, the MCAT, it's really difficult. So that's why I chose to do it after I graduate, to give myself the best shot at it and really take full time, dedicate 8 hours a day to it. So I know at the end of the day that I did put in my 100% potential into it. And it wasn't so, oh, maybe if I had more time, maybe if I had dedicated full time, I would have done better. I don't want to look back and think like that. Instead, I want to just give it my all and try my best and see how it goes. So personally, for me, the juggling with classes or any other obligation wasn't working. And so I had to really decide for myself to do it, to really sacrifice everything else and just stick with the MCAT for a summer. And that essentially also is about your timeline. Maybe some people want to do one gap year. And so essentially you would have to take the MCAT after your junior year and before your senior year. During that summer, that's kind of the prime time for one gap year. But I sat down with myself and I really looked at my volunteer work so far, my hours I've accumulated, and I thought to myself, maybe I will benefit with one additional gap year. And during that additional gap year, I could study for my MCAT. So it really is based on where you're at. If you're comfortable taking 2 gap years, if I haven't made that clear, I am taking two with the original intent of taking one. But honestly, I think it's not a race, right? So I'm happy with the decision now, and I'm hoping that it works out well. So,
So when you decided, were you still doing little itty bitty passages here and there, or you just dropped it kind of cold turkey?
oh, cold turkey, when I decided I'm not doing this, it was during my fall quarter of senior year. I said I made a plan, right? I didn't just kind of put it on the back, like I didn't just forget about it. Instead, I sat down with myself and I made a plan. Okay, so we're not going to do this. We're not going to be trying to take this exam in March. Instead, we're going to just extend our application by a year and we're going to take it in the summer after senior year and apply the following cycle. And so it's something that I had to, it was, don't get me wrong, it was very difficult for me at the time to acknowledge that I did have to kind of get set back a year. It really was difficult for me, but I realized that in the grand scheme of things, a one applying this year versus next year isn't going to do much. But if I apply with a bad MCAT score because I was just juggling too many things at once, that essentially is going to be much worse than extending by a year. So,
Very good. And one thing that I really appreciate about you is that you did go out of your way to look for research and you really stuck with it and you were actually able to publish, which I think is, a very, very good experience. Not to say that it's going to, distinguish you from others that didn't publish, even though it sort of does, but you were able to work through all the mechanics of finding a lab, getting building a relationship with the PI, running through an entire set of experiments or clinical research, and being able to publish it and present it. So tell me a little bit. I mean, how did you decide on clinical research versus a basic science research?
so I personally, when I decided to do clinical research, I had no idea what it really was. Heard the word clinical and I was like, oh, clinical, okay, cool. But essentially, what clinical research is it's more so you're working with patient subjects instead of in a lab where you're working with mice or rats or whatever the species is. And to me, clinical was, I actually did both. Fun fact. I did both because I really wanted to see what's out there. I really wanted to explore the world of basic science, but also explore the world of clinical research and see what works for what do I like better? Where do I see myself in the next 2, 3 years? The one thing I will say about research is I did try to start early. So around my beginning of my second year, I started to look at some research groups, some labs at UCLA. I did send the emails. I did receive radio silence from 80% of the PIs, but eventually I did find one doctor who does it's a study on finding a blood pressure drug, lisinopril, and its effects on reducing hepatocellular carcinoma severity. So to me, that was something that I genuinely thought I could see myself doing in the next 2 years. And it was more relevant, I think, to medicine. Like I thought at that time that it seemed more relevant to medicine. And so I kind of just got in there. It wasn't anything intentional for me. Finding my path for research was very much so trial and error. It really was just putting myself in there, checking it out, seeing if I like it. If not, I wasn't scared to kind of be vocal about, oh, I don't like this. I want to try something else. I think that's super important. I think some students sometimes get into something and so, as a students, we think that, oh, we get this opportunity and this is the only opportunity we'll ever get. But essentially, that's not true at the end of the day. If you get into a research and you don't like it, I think the one thing to do is have that courage to remove yourself from that situation, find another lab. There are other labs and other positions that are waiting for you. And it's not just kind of that one thing, that's it. Um, I was actually going to talk about my experience, I think. So what happened with mine is I originally got into my clinical research without being vocal about what my goals were, and I think that hurt me for the first year. And so my advice to everyone is no matter what research you're in, I think it's super important to communicate what you're looking for in that position. It's make sure to communicate with the PI. Oh, so I'm a pre-med student and I want to get into med school. And in order to do that, I need to have strong research background, and a publication won't hurt. A presentation won't hurt. Make sure you're very, very vocal with your PI from the very beginning about what it is you're looking for in that position. And I cannot stress this enough because the PI has so many things to worry about, and so it's up to you to really get the best out of your position. And so that entails really bugging your PI about your expectations, not only their expectations, but also your expectations and what you want to get out of that position. I cannot stress this enough. That was the one thing that set me back. I feel like I could have had a much more meaningful research experience from the get-go if I was very clear about what I wanted to get out of this. In the first year, I was stuck doing really a lot of rut kind of, I was making these like Excel sheets for my clinical research. It wasn't research, I want to say. It was more so, I got nothing out of it, but it was my fault because I didn't have the courage to kind of say, oh, I don't want to do this. But you are allowed to not want to do something in your research. And please just know your worth and make sure you're always communicating with the higher ups in any research position.
Yeah, I know that is really important because their time frame might be very different from yours. You know, if you're going to start on a 2 or 3 year basic science project, which is what the PI has in mind, but you only have 3 months to try and get something out before, your time frame changes, that's going to be very important. And I do think it's important for people to know that it is a little bit easier and quicker to do clinical research projects because the data is already there. The patients have already been through their clinical events, the data has been gathered. It's quite organized on most EMRs. It's pretty easy to do data mining, put together a basic abstract and either present it or publish it. Basic science, it's like a sport, there's sort of a learning curve. You have to learn the lab techniques, do the experiments pan out. You can sometimes publish negative experiments, but that's really at the discretion of your PI. So I think learning these in advance, that's why it's important to network and talk to your peers, and understand which PIs have a better reputation of being undergrad or importantly, pre-health friendly. You might go to a basic science lab, and if you're not honest about the fact that you're pre-health and they have sort of a bias against pre-health students, you're going to be there for a rude awakening. So with that being said, what was it like getting published? I think it's a very noteworthy event. And tell us about it. How did you approach your PI? Did you orally present? Was it a poster presentation, online publication?
So I'm very happy you brought this up because this is another thing. So originally, I was very afraid of asking my PI if there's something about a publication. I felt that it was so weird approaching my PI and saying, oh, hi, like I want a publication. But it's something you have to do. If you really want a publication or if you want some sort of independent project that's going to have some sort of output, you need to approach your PI and say, I'm applying to med school. The one thing that will make me a little more competitive is some sort of poster presentation, some sort of publication. And honestly, the way my PI responded, it's like a weight off my shoulders. He really was like, that's totally fine. Like, as he even told me he just wants me to communicate with him. And if there's something that he can do on his end to make my medical school application stronger, he's happy to do it. And so that's like an example of a positive response. You might have your PI say, no, I'm sorry, I can't publish you. And that's totally fine. But find these things out early. Find these things out early so you can at least have that leg room to get out of this lab and go to one that's going to give you more room to publish. And the one thing I will say about publications is do your due diligence before applying for a research position. And what I mean by that is what I did. Anytime there was a lab opening or a PI that anytime I was like looking for a research position, I would look their name up and see how active they are in the research world. So for example, there was a PI, really cool research, but his last publication was in 2019. And so I knew that I'm probably not going to get a publication out of this. So I kind of put that into mind. And then versus my PI right now at Cedars-Sinai, he pumps out publications every month. And so I knew that's from then I knew I was like, I have a better chance at getting published with this person than that person. But this is if you want to get published. Or if you don't want to get published and you want to just do research for the sake of research, then go by all means, look through the papers, see what really catches your eye. But for me, I really wanted to get a publication under my arm, at least one. So I really look to see which PIs are actively producing papers with a high turnaround time. And so with my publication, how this happened is after I graduated, I kind of told my PI my situation and how at this point I have a year to apply to med school, and I would love if I can have some sort of publication fast, because the projects that I was working on with my PI was taking too long. And I realized that it was going to take too long. And I kind of assessed the situation and I said, okay, so I have two projects right now that could be published, but I don't think they're going to be published in time. And so I told my PI this. I said, I would love if I can have some sort of co-author position on a project in the next few months. If there's something along those lines that you have available, I would really appreciate it. I'm very happy to help with whatever you need help with, just so I can have my name on a paper. Very honest, very straight up, because I think the journey's already so difficult. And I think it's so important to be very transparent. And he actually said that he will definitely be on the lookout. And in fact, he did. A week after that, he got this, a journal had requested him to submit some sort of like a literature review. And he forwarded the email to me and said, hey, I have a foreign exchange doctor, I think, who's working on this project. Would you like to help him out with it? I said, sure. He sends me the information, the data, we look over it, we have a meeting, and it got published within, I think it was within a month. So it was definitely all because I approached him and I asked him, I want a publication. So my issue was in the beginning was I was really scared to ask specifically for a publication because I thought that was so weird or so bratty in a way. But it's at the end of the day, you have to build your career. Their careers are already built, so you have to somehow really push them to help you build your career. And for me, it was just being very honest and transparent, and it worked out. It worked out very well. Within 2 months from the time I asked him, and then from the time he gave me that project, I was able to have a publication, and I'm super happy about it. So tip is just be transparent. You don't never know who's willing to help and who's willing to not help, but won't hurt to ask.
One thing I would add is, start early. You mentioned 2 months, that's on the quick end. Some of these projects can take a year or two. Finding a PI can sometimes take months. I remember my first research project took me about 4 months. I had met Dr. John Kabashigawa on a Friday night volunteering at UCLA. And, I asked him and, he gave me his email and I contacted him. It took almost 3 months for his assistant to get back to me. And then from there, I had to interview in the lab again and get registered and get a badge. So I think it took about 6 months until I started, and it really paid off. But planting these seeds early on. So we do have about 5 more minutes. I really wanted to focus a little bit more on the fact that, okay, you're extremely scholarly, you have excellent grades, you're preparing for the MCAT, you've done research and published. A lot of that still remains academic. How did you make sure you still wanted to, become a physician? Was it your volunteering activities? You obviously shadowed me, personal experiences. What added to your decision to pursue healthcare versus, a basic science career?
Yeah, so I want to say before I did any research of the sort, I decided to really prioritize clinical experiences to see if I even want to do this, if I even want to spend the next 3, 4 years at UCLA pursuing the pre-med journey. And so I had to see for myself if I am okay with being around sick patients, and if I'm enjoying, not enjoying, but if I'm okay with the hospital environment and being on my feet for hours and hours on end and dealing with the most sickest and vulnerable of patients. And so I had to see for myself if this is something that I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life. And so for the first year or two at UCLA, I really immersed myself into the hospital setting. And what I did, I actually got my phlebotomy license. At the time, I was tutoring for this lady who ended up having a school who does these certifications. So through that lady, I was able to take courses to get my phlebotomy license. And after a year of clinicals, and then taking my license exam, I was finally able to get licensed and work in a hospital. So that was kind of my foundation. That was my first time ever setting foot in a hospital and in an inpatient setting as well. So I was a night shift phlebotomist, and I would go to door and draw patients' blood at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And I would be in the ICU units, in the gastrointestinal unit, cardio unit. And these were very sick patients, very angry patients. And so I was able to really see how I work with in these very tough environments and to see if I even liked it. And I realized after a couple months of doing that I really did enjoy some being able to somehow give comfort to patients, even if that was before drawing, because a lot of patients are needle phobic. And so I was being able to kind of ease their anxiety before a venipuncture was meant a lot to me. And so I realized, oh, I really enjoy this. And so that's when I took it the next level and I started to get more involved in health fairs. That was the phlebotomy was more paid clinical experience that I did. But eventually, when I realized that I did want to do this, I started to get involved in health fairs. These were kind of it was a club that me and my friend had uh led that club around my third or second year, and we did kind of community health fairs here and there in the Van Nuys area where we provided free blood pressure screenings and blood glucose tests to kind of low income patients within the Van Nuys area. And so that was kind of my volunteer work, and even that made like really made me realize that this is what I want to do. I would love to pursue this for the rest of my life, essentially. And so I got involved within my community a lot and did participated in these health fairs and these free community screenings. And so that was another volunteer thing I did. But outside of medicine, I also volunteered. I taught dance to children with disabilities because dance is something that I've done my whole life. And I take so much comfort in dance. And I think that this was a perfect opportunity for me to kind of intertwine my passion and my own time and my professional goals as a physician. So it was kind of a great thing that brought those two together. And that being said, I do recommend you guys finding something that does that brings in your passion from your life as a human, and that brings together your career as a pre-med student. And that was a very rewarding experience as well. And so with that being said, I think first off, I think it's so important to put yourself in these uh, clinical settings and seeing if you like the hospital. The hospital is a completely different place from clinics and anything else, doctors' offices. So to me, being in the hospital, it's a whole different culture and a whole different environment. This is not talked about enough, but being on your feet, oh my goodness, that was such a big shock to me how bad my feet were hurting. So that's another thing. It's these little things here and there that you really learn. This is what the life in the hospital is, and these hour-long shifts as a medical student that you're going to have. So first and foremost, I would say shove your head in those settings and really see what it's like. And then from there on out, you can get involved in meaningful volunteer work and even something within your realm of passion that will also help you in your career. So,
Very good. Well, this wraps up our interview. Any other parting pearls of wisdom, Hasmik?
honestly, this was so awesome. Thank you, Dr. Sarkeesian. I just want to
Of
say
course.
we're all in this together and it's super stressful, but at the end of the day, lean into your support systems, find people who are also in the same place as you and do it together. And don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to say no to things that you realize are not for you. Don't be afraid to just explore and see what's out there because there's so much out there. And so, yeah, very happy to be here.
Absolutely. Hasmik, we thank you for your time. We wish you the best of luck. And as you know, you are one of our mentees, and it's a lifetime contract. So when the life cycle progresses, you'll be sitting here interviewing the next generation of mentees. So,
Wow, that means so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkeesian. I'm very happy to be here.
of course, as we say, bye bye.
Bye.